You might notice it first on a quiet Sunday afternoon, perhaps while you're walking through a park or sitting in your backyard. It's a subtle thing, something so mundane you've likely never given it a second thought. It's the fact that you aren't looking over your shoulder. You can close your eyes for a full minute, listening to the wind or the distant hum of traffic, and your heart rate won't spike. You don't scan the tree line for movement. You don't calculate the distance to the nearest climbable branch. This profound, everyday sense of safety is the most unnatural state in the history of our species. We are the only primates to ever feel this way, and frankly, according to the laws of biology, we shouldn't even be here to feel it at all. We are slow, we are physically weak, and for 99% of our history, we were the most popular item on the menu for every nightmare with claws. The paradox is simple. We survived a world that was perfectly designed to erase us. And yet, the very creatures that should have ended our story are now just shadows in our museums. The shadow is a persistent thing in our history, though we've spent decades trying to convince ourselves it wasn't there. For a long time, the prevailing scientific narrative was the man-the-hunter hypothesis. It was a comfortable story, one that suggested we rose to the top of the food chain because we were born killers, aggressive apes who took what they wanted with primitive clubs. But that story was a lie we told ourselves to feel better about our fragile bodies. In the 1980s, a researcher named C.K. Brain, working at the Swartkrans Cave in South Africa, began looking at the fossil record through a different lens. He wasn't looking at what humans killed, he was looking at what killed humans. He found something chilling. He realized that the piles of bones found in these ancient caves weren't the leftovers of human hunters. They were the trash heaps of leopards. We weren't the ones bringing the meat home. We were the meat. This realization fundamentally dismantled our self-image. We weren't the protagonists of an action movie, we were the extras in a horror film, barely clinging to the edge of existence. And the monsters in that film were far more specialized than anything we face today. The shadow of the predator was most clearly defined by a creature called Dinophelus, the false saber-tooth. While most large cats of the Pliocene and Pleistocene focused on giant herbivores like mammoths or ancient horses, Dinophelus was different. Based on its skeletal structure and the specific wear patterns on its teeth, many paleoanthropologists believe this cat was a specialist. It wasn't hunting the biggest thing in the forest, it was hunting us. It was roughly the size of a modern jaguar but with more powerful front limbs, built for pinning down struggling prey rather than long-distance sprinting. It was an ambush predator that lived in the same environments as our ancestors, the Australopithecines. Imagine being 3.5 feet tall, weighing 60 pounds, and knowing that somewhere in the tall grass is a 150-pound shadow that can see in the dark and move without making a sound. Scientists like Dr. Travis Pickering have spent years documenting the landscape of fear these predators created. It wasn't just about the moment of the kill, it was about the constant, crushing psychological pressure of being prey. This pressure should have broken us. It should have driven us into extinction before we ever learned to sharpen a stone. But instead, it forced us into a biological gamble that changed the world. To understand that gamble, you have to look at the shadow cast by our own bodies. Biologically, humans are a disaster. If you put a fit human in a ring with a chimpanzee of the same weight, the chimp will win every single time. They are 3 to 5 times stronger than us because their muscle fibers are packed differently. We traded raw power for fine motor control, which is great for painting or typing, but useless when a leopard has you by the throat. We are also painfully slow. Even Usain Bolt, at his peak, would be easily run down by a common house cat, let alone a Pleistocene predator. We can't climb as well as our cousins, we have no natural armor, and our teeth are barely suited for chewing tough vegetables, let alone defending our lives. But in the midst of all this weakness, we developed a weird, niche superpower. We can sweat. Most predators are built for the sprint. A saber-tooth or a short-faced bear can explode with terrifying speed, but they generate massive amounts of internal heat. They are like high-performance engines with no radiator. Humans, however, are covered in millions of eccrine sweat glands. We are the only mammals that can dump heat while moving at a high heart rate. This allowed us to engage in something called persistence hunting. We didn't have to be faster than the predator, we just had to be more patient. We could follow an animal in the midday sun, keeping it moving, never letting it rest, until its own blood literally began to cook its organs. It was a gruesome, slow-motion victory, but it meant we were finally stepping out of the shadows and into the light. But sweat and patience wouldn't save you from a pack of cave hyenas in the middle of the night. For that, you needed something that doesn't show up in the fossil record as clearly as a bone or a tooth. You needed the shadow of a friend. In 2001, at a site called Dmanisi in the Republic of Georgia, archaeologists uncovered a skull that dates back 1.8 million years. It belonged to an individual of the species Homo erectus, and it tells a story that is almost impossible to believe. The individual was elderly, and most importantly, they were completely toothless. In the wild, a toothless predator or a toothless herbivore is a dead animal. They cannot process food, they cannot defend themselves, and the group will almost always abandon them to save resources. But this individual didn't die when they lost their teeth. The bone of the jaw had completely healed and resorbed, meaning they lived for years in this helpless state. This is the first definitive evidence of social cushioning. Someone was chewing food for this person. Someone was protecting them from the shadows. Someone was carrying them when the group moved. This wasn't just cooperation, it was a radical new strategy. By keeping the weak alive, we kept their knowledge alive. The elderly held the map of the world in their heads, where the water was during a drought, which plants were poisonous, and how the predators moved 10 years ago. We traded individual strength for collective intelligence. We became a single organism with 1,000 eyes and a single, shared memory. And that's when the predators started to lose their advantage. The shift became permanent when we learned to control the one thing every other animal on Earth instinctively fears: the shadow destroyer, fire. At Wonderwork Cave in South Africa, researchers have found evidence of controlled fires dating back 1 million years. This wasn't just a way to stay warm. Fire was a wall. Most predators have eyes that are highly sensitive to low light, which gives them a massive advantage at dusk and dawn. But fire creates a circle of flickering, unpredictable light that ruins a predator's night vision. If a lion looks at a campfire, it can't see anything in the darkness behind it. The fire turned the night from a time of terror into a time of productivity. But more importantly, fire allowed us to cook. This is the expensive tissue hypothesis proposed by Leslie Aiello and Peter Wheeler. Digesting raw meat and tough tubers takes a massive amount of energy. By cooking our food, we essentially pre-digested it, allowing our guts to shrink and our brains to explode in size. Our brains are energy hogs. They take up 2% of our body weight but use 20% of our calories. Without fire, we could never have afforded the intelligence required to outsmart the world's deadliest killers. We literally ate our way to the top of the food chain. But as our brains grew, we began to realize that just surviving wasn't enough. We needed to change the rules of the game entirely. As we stepped further into this new role, the shadow we cast over the landscape began to grow longer and darker for the animals around us. We moved from being accidental prey to being intentional architects of our environment. We developed the throwing spear, like the famous wooden ones found in Skaaningen, Germany, dating back 400,000 years. These weren't just sticks, they were aerodynamically balanced weapons that allowed us to kill from a distance. For the first time in the history of life on Earth, a predator's strength didn't matter. You could be a 2,000-pound short-faced bear, the largest mammalian predator to ever walk the plains, but if a group of humans could hit you with 3 spears from 30 feet away, your size was just a larger target. We broke the physical contract of nature. We removed the risk from the predator-prey relationship. And then, something truly strange happened. Roughly 50,000 years ago, as modern humans spread out of Africa and into Europe and the Americas, the great predators didn't just hide, they vanished. The cave lion, the scimitar cat, the dire wolf, the giant hyena, they all went extinct. There is a massive debate among scientists about how much of this was due to climate change and how much was due to us. But the pattern is hard to ignore. Wherever the clever ape arrived, the monsters died out. We didn't just survive the world's deadliest predators, we inherited their world, and then we remodeled it until there was no room left for them. The transition from prey to predator was so successful that it has actually left a scar on our modern psychology. We still carry the landscape of fear within us. Why do you think children are instinctively afraid of the dark? Or why we have a universal fascination with monsters in our movies? It's because for 2 million years, the monster was real, and it was right outside the cave. We are the descendants of the people who were jumpy, the ones who looked at the rustle in the grass and assumed it was a tiger rather than the wind. The brave humans who didn't worry about the shadows didn't live long enough to pass on their genes. Our entire nervous system is a finely tuned predator detection machine, built by millions of years of being hunted. We are walking fossils of a war we don't even remember winning. But this victory came with a hidden cost. By removing the predators, we removed the primary force that shaped our evolution. For eons, the leopard and the saber-tooth were our trainers. They forced us to be faster, smarter, and more communal. They were the ones who winnowed out the weak and rewarded the innovators. Without them, we became the masters of the planet, but we also became something much more dangerous. A predator with no natural checks and balances. This brings us back to that quiet afternoon in the park. You feel safe because you have successfully outsourced your survival. You don't have to worry about the shadow in the grass because we've paved over the grass. You don't have to worry about the night because we've banished it with LED bulbs and humming power grids. We have reached a point where the only thing left on this planet that can truly threaten a human is another human, or the tiny, microscopic predators like viruses that we are still learning to outsmart. We are the survivors of an evolutionary gauntlet that should have ended in the first act. We are the slow, hairless apes who decided that being prey was a temporary condition. But there is a haunting question that lingers in the silence of our modern world. If our intelligence, our cooperation, and our fire were all forged in the heat of being hunted, what happens to us now that the hunt is over? Are we still the same species if we no longer have anything to fear? Or have we just traded the shadow of the predator for the shadow of our own ambition? Consider the cave hyena, Pachycrocuda. This wasn't just a slightly larger version of the spotted hyenas you see on nature documentaries. It was a beast the size of a lion with a skull built like a heavy-duty industrial crusher. Its bite force was estimated to be over 1,100 pounds per square inch, enough to snap a human femur like a dry twig. They were pack hunters and they were clever. They didn't just kill, they utilized every scrap of the carcass. In caves across Eurasia, we find bone beds, where these hyenas dragged their kills. Mixed in with the bones of ancient rhinoceros and deer are the telltale fragments of human skulls. For hundreds of thousands of years, we were a secondary food source for these animals. They would wait for a leopard to make a kill, drive the leopard away, and then scan the area for any stray hominids who might be trying to scavenge the leftovers. We were competing for the same scraps in a brutal, zero-sum game. The fact that we are the ones sitting in climate-controlled rooms talking about them, and they are the ones reduced to dusty bone fragments in a drawer, is the greatest upset in the history of life. It's like a team of high schoolers winning the Super Bowl for 10,000 years in a row. The secret to that upset was our ability to perceive time. Most predators live in a perpetual now. A lion is hungry, so it hunts. It is full, so it sleeps. It reacts to the immediate environment. But humans began to live in the then and the tomorrow. We looked at a footprint in the mud and didn't just see a shape, we saw a story. We saw which direction the animal was going, how fast it was moving, and how long ago it passed. This is called displaced reference, the ability to communicate about things that aren't right in front of you. This allowed us to set traps. We could imagine a future where the predator walked down a specific path, and we could prepare for that future by digging a pit or hiding with stones. We outthought the predators because we could play the game in 4 dimensions while they were stuck in 3. We became the first species to weaponize the future. And once we did that, the physical advantages of the predators, the claws, the teeth, the night vision, became obsolete. They were playing a game of checkers, and we were playing a game of grandmaster-level chess where we could see 50 moves ahead. But even with all that mental power, the physical reality of the Pleistocene was grueling. We have to imagine the sheer level of loss our ancestors endured. For every Dmanisi elder who was cared for, There were likely dozens of children who were snatched from the edge of the camp in the blink of an eye. The trauma of being prey is baked into our folklore. Every story about an ogre in a cave or a wolf in the woods is a cultural memory of a time when the forest was a place of certain death. This is why we have such a deep-seated need to control our environment. We don't just build houses, we build fortresses. We don't just plant gardens, we clear-cut the wild. Our entire civilization is, in a sense, a massive overcorrection to the vulnerability of our ancestors. We are so afraid of being prey that we have made sure nothing else can be a predator. We have created a world where the only monsters left are the ones we create in our own minds, because the real ones were too terrifying to live with. The real reveal, the thing that changes how you look at yourself in the mirror, is that we didn't survive despite our weaknesses, we survived because of them. If we had been born with the claws of a lion or the strength of a bear, we never would have needed to invent fire. We never would have needed to cooperate with each other to such an intense degree. We never would have needed to develop the complex language required to plan a hunt or share a map. Our fragility was the spark that ignited our brilliance. We were forced to be smart because we couldn't afford to be stupid. We were forced to be kind because a lone human was a dead human. Every beautiful thing about our species, our art, our science, our empathy, is a direct result of being the favorite snack of a prehistoric cat. We are the children of the shadows, and we only learned to reach for the stars because we were so afraid of what was lurking in the bushes. So, how did we survive? We survived by turning our vulnerability into a bond and our fear into a tool. We survived because we realized that one spear is a toy, but 10 spears are a wall. We survived because we decided that a toothless old man was worth more than a fresh kill. We survived because we learned to tell stories about the monsters until the monsters weren't as scary as the stories. We didn't win through a sudden burst of violence. We won through a million years of stubborn, collective refusal to go extinct. We outlasted the greatest killers the world has ever known, not by becoming more like them, but by becoming more like us. We turned the landscape of fear into a landscape of knowledge, and in doing so, we changed the trajectory of life on Earth forever. The predators gave us the ultimate gift. They gave us the necessity of becoming human. Now, think about that next time you're feeling stressed about a deadline or a social interaction. Think about the fact that your ancestors stood their ground against 2,000-pound bears with nothing but a sharpened stick and the person standing next to them. You are the end product of a 2-million-year winning streak against the most lopsided odds in history. You aren't just a person sitting in a chair, you are the pinnacle of a survival story so epic it makes every movie ever made look like a children's book. You are the prey that became the king, the slow ape that outran the wind, the creature that taught the fire to sit still and the night to go away. And this brings us back to the mundane piece of your daily life. That feeling of safety you have right now? It isn't a gift. It's a trophy. It is the hard-won result of a million generations who refuse to be eaten. Every time you walk through the dark without looking back, you are proving that the gamble our ancestors took worked. We have reached the point where we are so successful that we've forgotten why we were so afraid in the first place. But the next time you see a cat's eyes reflect in the dark, or you hear a sudden snap of a twig in the woods, pay attention to that little jolt of adrenaline. That's not a mistake. That's a greeting from your ancestors. It's a reminder of where you came from and what it took to get you here. It's a reminder that the world was once a place of shadows, and you are the reason those shadows are finally empty. But what do you think? When you look at our history, do you see a story of triumph, or do you see a story of loss? Have we lost something vital now that we no longer have a trainer to keep us sharp? Or are we finally becoming the species we were always meant to be, now that the fear is gone? I'd love to hear your thoughts on this, especially if you've ever felt that ancient prey instinct kick in when you were out in the wild. It's a fascinating window into our past that we all still carry. And if you want to dive deeper into these kinds of evolutionary rabbit holes with me, hit that subscribe button. We're going to be exploring a lot more of these hidden chapters of our story. The truth is, your existence is the most improbable thing in the universe. You are the descendant of the weak who outsmarted the strong, the slow who outlasted the fast, and the terrified who became the terrifying. You don't need to wonder if you have what it takes to survive the challenges of your life, because the very fact that you are breathing is proof that your bloodline is the most successful killing machine in history. You aren't just a part of nature, you are the thing that nature couldn't stop. You can stop looking over your shoulder now. You are the reason the grass is quiet.